In the name of God, the most merciful, the compassionate, peace be unto you all. In the beginning of my presentation, let me promise you what Elizabeth Taylor promised her 8 husbands, that I will not keep you long. 5 centuries of legacy and 15 minutes, but I'll try. There's a crystal clear historical evidence that many of the founding fathers, especially some of the most influential among them, were either deists or Unitarians or Unitarian sympathizers. Both of these Enlightenment ideologies, deism as well as Unitarianism, were directly influenced by Islamic thought through figures like Michael Servetus, Henry Stub, John Toland, and especially by Polish Socinians. The founding fathers were directly influenced by English thinkers such as John Locke, Isaac Newton, and some other natural philosophers who were in turn influenced by Islamic sciences, philosophy, theology, political thinking, and morality. Thomas Jefferson, one of the most important founding fathers, he once said that the 3 greatest men that have ever lived without any exception, they are John Locke, Francis Bacon, and Isaac Newton. And majority of the scholarship, they agree that Lockean words, ideas were incorporated in the Bill of Rights, in the Declaration of Independence, and also in the American Constitution, especially Carl Baker's and number of others. They clearly say, and I'm quoting Carl Baker here, he says, most Americans had absorbed Locke's works as a kind of political gospel, and the Declaration in its form, in its phraseology, follows closely certain sentences in Locke's second treatise on government. There are so many other scholars, and I will conclude this part with Jerome Höhler, who says that the American founding is basically essentially Lockean. There are differences of opinion, but very few people will diminish the role of Locke in the Bill of Rights, in DOI, and in American Constitution. The famous phrase of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were directly borrowed from Locke's second treatise and represent perhaps one of the most noticeable influences. Now, let's talk about John Locke. John Locke was accused of being a Mohammedan. Mohammedan means Muslim, by his adversaries such as John Edwards, who was his contemporary, and a leader in the church. Because Locke's theological insights, moral philosophy, and political outlook resembled Islamic teachings. Locke argued in his Reasonable of Christianity, 1695, that Jesus was neither God nor divine, but just a Messiah. He disagreed with the church, disagreed with the dogma of original sin, satisfaction through resurrection, or satisfaction through crucifixion as well as resurrection, and focused more upon human innocence, human capability to learn through experience, and also human capability of making the moral judgments. So therefore, Locke, who was influenced by the Socinian, basically disagreed with the fundamental church dogmas of Trinity, original sin, satisfaction, predestination, as well as some of those issues which were used by the church to establish their authority. And I'll quote Justin Champion, who is one of the authority on the subject, especially in the 16th and 17th century. He says that, Justin Champion and others have shown that John Locke's adversaries saw in him a Muslim who interpreted the Christian gospel in light of the Quran. Champion states that indeed Edwards, in his Socinianism Unmasked, had confronted John Locke, the author of The Reasonableness of Christianity, firstly as a Socinian and then by implication as a Muslim. He wrote, "It's likely I shall further exasperate this author when I desire the reader to observe that this lank faith of his is in a manner no other than the faith of a Turk. Edwards objected to Locke's assertion that there was only one necessary defining cradle belief in Christianity, accessible to all understanding, that Jesus was the Messiah. Edward commented that Locke seems to have consulted the Muhammadan Bible, which is Quran. We know that Locke possessed an edition of the Quran. Now, here Locke's adversaries were not only vilifying his anti-Christian beliefs, but also identifying his source. Locke's theological as well as philosophical outlook resembled Islamic perspective on Jesus, so much so that a cursory reader of the Quran or Islamic theology could have not missed it. Almost all Christian sects, including the most heretical ones, such as the Arians, believed that Jesus possessed some sort of divine nature. Now, all of us, we know the difference between the Nicene and the Arians were not based upon the hard or soft divinity. Arians did believe that you can call Jesus as God and worship him as God. And at the time of incarnation, the Logos took over the human person of Jesus. And the one who died on the cross was the divine Logos. But he did not make him equal to God or of the same substance with God. That's what St. Athanasius and the Nicene Creed established. So therefore, to call John Locke or Newton or the others as somehow following the Arian heresy is not correct, because Arian believed in pre-existence of Jesus, in the soft divinity of Jesus, worship of Jesus, but John Locke believed that he was just a prophetic Messiah, a human being. At the same time, sometimes we are told that the Alexandrian Monophysite, they denied the divinity of Jesus, so John Locke was following them, but that's not true. They denied the dual personality of Jesus, which was accepted by Chalcedon, a perfect God and a perfect human being. But these Monophysites, they said that once the divine Logos incarnated in Jesus, then he took over the human personality. So the difference was Monophysitism, diphysite, and it was not the issue of Trinity. As well as sometimes the Ebionites are told as the precursors of John Locke and Isaac Newton. But we are told that, number one, the historical, I would say, reference to them are very scarce, because everything is polemic. At the same time, they also believe that Jesus was a kind of special angel who was adopted by God as a son. So they worshipped him as a son of God, as a Messiah, but in Islamic terminology, that is not the issue, and that's what we are seeing in John Locke, that Jesus is neither God nor angel, but a human prophetic Messiah, and that is the core of the creed, which should be the core of salvation. Let me also say that why I am focusing upon theological background, because in 15th, 16th, and 17th century, the church and state, they have got a kind of alliance. The church was governing in the name of Jesus, because human beings are born with original sin and they do not have the capacity to make the right judgment, and only the church can forgive the sins on behalf of God. And using Romans 13, they have given this authority to the civil authorities, to the monarchs, that they are ruling on behalf of God. And submitting to their authority is submitting to the authority of God. And rebelling against the kings is rebelling against God. So therefore, this alliance was something which was in the mind of the reformers, and especially the radical reformers, who wanted to attack the dogmas, showing people their irrationality, and by means of challenging one authority, going to the next authority, which is the monarchical authority. So therefore, sometimes looking at it from the perspective of theology or religious background is important, because as the previous speaker, Steve, just mentioned, even here in the United States of America, the fight between the Puritans and Roger Williams was not political, it was also based upon religiosity, theology, and religious thinking. Anyhow, I am going to go Okay. John Locke's Mohammedan connection or Islamic connection could possibly be traced back to his Socinian association. H.A. McLaughlin, John Marshall have clearly proven that John Locke was an outright Socinian. Now, I have to summarize. Socinians were very much influenced by the Islamic thought. The person Michael Servetus, who was the precursor of Socinians, came from Spain, have interacted with thousands of Muslims, studied Quran, went to Africa, studied with some of the Muslim doctors, and came back and quoted the verses of the Quran, specific chapters of the Quran, to say that Trinity is basically irrational and it is not the original part of Jesus' message. He also believed that Jesus has come to rectify the excesses of the Jewish temple, and Muhammad came to rectify the Trinitarian and the other excesses of the church. So therefore, from them, Socinians, they took this anti-Trinitarian as well as the lack of thought of the original sin or satisfaction through death or resurrection of Jesus, and they focused so much upon toleration, upon human dignity, upon human autonomy, moral justice, as well as salvation through good deeds. And most of these things, especially the Socinius and his uncle, they quoted the Quran. That's where the church leaders, whether the Protestants or the Catholics or the Anglican, all of them, they blamed them that they are actually preaching the Turkish Christ in the guise of Christianity. And they blamed them to be Muslims. In the beginning, they did not deny it, but once they saw people being burnt alive, everybody said, we do not have any Muhammadan connections. It is from reason, and reason is a God-given gift to all of us. Anyhow, but I want to focus a little bit upon people like Henry Stub. Henry Stub is a class fellow of John Locke from Westminster. Both of them, they attended Christ Church and went to Dr. Pocock's classes. Pocock has spent a lot of time in Aleppo and Constantinople and was the chair of Arabic language. Now, you will be astonished that Henry Stub, Newton, John Locke, their ideas are so close. And Henry Stub had converted to Islam. In his book, The Rise of, an account of the rise and progress of Mohammedanism and a vindication of him and his religion from the calumnies of the Christians. He basically said that Muhammad's ideas and religion is the true inheritor of the original Christians. So Mohammedan Christianity is the model which should be applied in England. And I'm going to read here some of the stuff which he has said. Actually what he says, he said, look at the Mohammedan empire, look at Muhammad himself, look at Islam. It allows toleration for the Jews and the Christians. It allows so much difference of opinion within Islamic thought. As long as one is able to follow the minimal credo of Islam, there is no God but God, and Prophet Muhammad is the Prophet of God. So many philosophical, mystical, so many other kinds of opinions are incorporated, accepted, and tolerated. So therefore, from his perspective, as Justin has shown, as well as James Jacob has shown, that he wanted the Mohammedan model to be applied in England. And he said this is the resolution of the problem of what has been created by the church as well as by the monarch. And he was a close friend of Charles Blount, who was the founder of deism. So from James as well as Justin Champion's perspective, Henry Stub is the founder of what we call rationalism, natural religion, as well as the modern deism. And what he combined is Stub must now be reckoned as one of the founders of English deism, though his creed were in the guise of the Mohammedan Christianity. I want to conclude this one that this same influence comes all the way to our founding fathers. If you look at Jefferson, their views on Trinity, original sin, justification are no different whatsoever from John Locke, Isaac Newton, and from the Islamic perspective. Finally, I want to say that John Locke's study the Hay bin Yaqzan, one of the novels written by Ibn Tufail, one of the famous philosophers who was the teacher of Ibn Rushd or Averroes. Hay bin Yaqzan was translated into Latin by John Locke's teacher Edward Pocock. And in that, Ibn Tufail summarizes the objectives of Islamic Sharia: preservation of life, property, family, intellect or reason, as well as the life. So John Locke has studied it, and Russell has shown it that John Locke studied it. He summarized those 5 into 4, and Thomas Jefferson took it from John Locke and said that you can own property, you can have family, but you may not be happy if you do not make the proper choices. So the pursuit of happiness is the inalienable right and not the family or the property itself. So life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, in my mind, is a kind of summarized version of the 5 objectives of Islamic Sharia. Thank you very much.